No, you told me two things, and I always tell Kat that one of these days I'm going to write a book and I'm going to put these two things in it. Is that you? I don't know if you remember this. You sat me down and said, if you've got a plan B, you never had a plan A. And I love that, and to this day I've used that on so many people. I'm like, what's your plan B? No, then you don't have a plan A.
Welcome to Y'all Street. Today I speak with Derrick Ratliff, the founder of Horizon Firearms and the pioneer of the .22 Creedmoor. Derrick, you want a cup of coffee?
Heck yeah, hook me up.
I saw this coffee cup, easily distracted by cows, and I immediately thought of you.
I appreciate it very much.
You couldn't pick two people with more different backgrounds than you
Thank
and
you
me.
so much.
I grew up in a tenement building, the first floor of a tenement building on a street with one tree, and you grew up surrounded by cows.
I did, and I love this so much. It's perfect time. Cheers, by the way.
Coffee cheers.
It's hot too.
Yeah, very hot.
Dude, I love this so much because we just went and saw my parents for Easter, and I bought a couple cows from them because we're doing some meat stuff. And I have, with my own cows, I've gotten rid of all the angry cows. But my dad...
What's an angry cow?
Dude, one that will just put you on the fence. We call it bite you. My mom says snort in your pocket. You know, all those kind of great things. And so we're at Easter, and I'm thinking, man, I've gotten rid of all the angry cows. My dad comes in. So I pinned those two cows up for you. Whew. And I'm thinking, my dad has ranched my whole life. And if my dad has given me the whew, yeah. So we loaded them up, bloody nose, the whole deal. They are mean cows. So this is perfect timing.
This is Boyd, Texas.
It's Boyd, Texas.
Have you always lived on the same ranch in Boyd?
So my family has been in Boyd forever. So my family came to Texas in 1876.
No way.
Oh yeah, and settled in Boyd. And so that property was, purchased by my granddad and grandmother. And so it's all I've ever known, right? And of course, like now I live in not College Station. I live in Bryan, Texas. I got to be real careful because the College Station and Bryan culture is a little bit different. But yeah, my parents still live in the same place I grew up, and run cows, and we've had horses, and just love the outdoor lifestyle.
So what was it like growing up? Like what was a typical day? I have horses now. My children are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, taking care of the animals and the chickens and all that kind of stuff. I know you got two brothers.
Yep. I got two younger brothers, and one works with us at Horizon, and one's an engineer, lives up in the Fort Worth, Dallas area. And so, yeah, I mean, it was your typical ranch. Like it was, there was hard days and easy days. We had 12 horses, hundreds of cows, and it was just like, I just loved it. I still love it, right?
You say typical ranch. I don't know that a lot of people listening, I mean, somebody's in New Jersey, where, what's a typical Texas ranch?
Well, it's hard to describe, and I think it's hard to describe, and I'm going to tell you kind of why. It was always variable, right? And I think that's why I've gotten so good at moving and juking and creating a company and all those kind of things, is because no one day was
solving
ever the
problems.
Same. Yeah.
Every single day you were dealing with an issue.
Anything from we got a cow that's having a calf and needs to have the calf pulled, or horse get injured here, or like during Easter, we're literally having Easter dinner, and Dad gets a phone call that we've got a cow out on the neighbors in the creek, right? And so it's like you said, problem solving, and I love one story I always tell, and it's something I look at when we try and hire employees. So my dad would drop us off to go plow, right? And so, man, we got to drive the tractor. It was a big deal, right? Air conditioned tractor and a radio, big thing. And this is before cell phones. And so Dad would put us in the tractor, drop us off at daylight, and he'd hand us a brown paper sack of lunch and a basket, bucket, some sort of tool container. And here you go. I'll pick you up at dark. And what I learned really quick, and what I've tried to do as we interview employees, is you learn to be capable, right? Because if the tractor breaks and you finish with lunch, you're sitting there till dark, so you might as well figure out how to fix it. And so it's just, like I said, being able to be somewhat nimble and be ready for kind of everything.
And your brothers are both engineers.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So and my middle brother's a civil engineer, and he's got a master in petroleum. My youngest brother is actually in charge of engineering for Horizon, and his background's more in visualization, animation, like the creative side of engineering. For me, I always give them a hard time and tell them they're engineers because I kind of had to pave the way. So if Austin, Logan listen, I'm going to throw them that, because I was actually the first in our family to go to college. And so being in a small town, I graduated with 80 kids. And, you went to A&M because you wanted to be a vet. And so then I got to A&M.
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M, yep. And so I got to Texas A&M, and it was almost like, wow, you can actually major in those things. That's how somebody does something besides, a vet.
So on the family farm, was that the primary source of income? Was cattle?
Yep, cattle, and we did a lot of we did ranching and farming. So we had a lot of hay and soybeans, and growing up we had peanuts, and then we had the ranch side on the side.
And no employees, or did you have day workers? Or?
No, it was pretty much day workers. It was my dad and granddad, and then my mom worked at the school district, in accounting forever. Has since retired and working with dad on the ranch. But no, and we'd have cowboys come in and do day work and stuff, and that was some of my favorite things. We had one of my granddad's really good friends. His name was Butch South. So imagine old school Dodge pickup, beat it all heck. And when he talked, he kind of had a whistle and always would tell old cowboy stories. And I loved riding around in the pickup with him. And one day I remember it's kind of a side tangent here, but kind of parallels in the guns. I remember one day he was going behind the back of his seat of his pickup, pulled it forward like an old truck to get a rope out of the back. And I saw an old pistol in there. And he was a Marine, and he told the story. He's like, I walked from Italy to Berlin, and I picked that up off of a German soldier, and I figured I was come over this far, and I was taking it home with me.
Wow!
And those guys just taught me so much, and my dad and granddad let me go to sell barns basically during high school, so I'd drive the trailer and truck there and buy cows, and I got to learn a lot of that culture and love it so much.
I'm just really interested in, I guess, the annual process of, you said there's soybeans, there's peanuts, there's cows.
Anything that you could try and make a little money.
Yeah. So was your dad like penciling out, I need, this many cows sold at such and such price, and, I need, this for the crop, or this for the peanuts?
You try. One thing I learned with dad and them, and I think you see it a lot in myself, is sometimes you get an idea and you just have to run full steam at it, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Dad and mom have always said, the cattle market's no different than the stock market. Right now the market's really good. Tariffs have been helpful for, the cattle market, and, supplies low, so prices are good. And, you kind of live feast and famine, and then the crops almost offset that, right? And sometimes they were great and sometimes they weren't. And so, growing up, it was just, you just learned to kind of do and exist and take the good times and the bad times. And it was kind of a fun thing.
We talk a lot about product in our company, but food is known as produce.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And the words are connected to each other. And when you think about farming, it really is a complete company.
Yeah.
I mean, from the inventory on the seeds, and the diesel that you need to buy, and then you have equipment that you're depreciating, and you have maybe not employees, maybe your sons or day workers or Butch or whomever else is coming in, and that's overhead that you have to pay for. And there's distribution that you need to sort out, and there's offtake in a variety of different places, but you got to worry about the numbers and who's paying what, and how far do I have to take the cows to a sale barn or whatever.
And even on a lot of it, I saw that you have to be really good with people too. I mean, in terms of I'm growing up, we did cantaloupes and watermelons, right? And I remember, 5 a.m. we'd get in the truck and go pick cantaloupes and watermelons and take them downtown Fort Worth, and then selling them directly to your, IGAs and your HEB grocery stores and stuff. So you had to kind of do everything.
Yeah.
But
it's a great background for an entrepreneur, for somebody
100%.
Starting his own company, right?
100%.
That's kind of what as I'm hearing what you're saying, just thinking about how difficult that must be. We have all of our own problems. I mean, in manufacturing and
exactly.
Distribution and warehousing and all that kind of stuff. But gosh, being a farmer, and it's year round. I mean, it's not, you're not taking PTO for 2 weeks in the summer, and the nights and weekends are totally consumed. I mean, it's 100%. I have a deep appreciation for anybody that's a farmer or.
It's just an interesting, like you said, I love that you parallel it with entrepreneurship, because it really is that all the time, and you learn kind of, you take the wins, and I like to call it, and we at Casper Outdoors, Horizon, we say playing offense, right? And we got a chance to interview Boz Rutan on the Horizon podcast. I'm talking to Boz, and it's like, how do you beat a guy who's bigger than you? And he was like, man, you step in and you take the power out of the punch, and you're going to take more punches, but you can deliver more punches. And I think that's just like the grit you kind of have to grow up with. And he said, as an entrepreneur, man, that was That's been a slugfest. Is the best way. I had somebody at church this last week ask me, "Man, would you ever consider starting another?" And before they said business, I was like, "No, never again." So.
I was talking to Tom Power, and we were just, focusing on the word perseverance, how important it is to anybody that has a company. You have to persevere through difficult times.
I mean, 100%. And the word I like probably even better than perseverance is just grit. It feels more cowboy, right? It feels more country.
Sure.
It's like put some dirt in and keep going. But no, 100%. It's just, I think I have gotten to where I enjoy problem solving, which is a different kind of mindset, right? It's like, not like trying to rush in as hero and solve this or that, but like I genuinely enjoy the process of being visionary, looking far enough and forward, and then bobbing and weaving to figure out how to get down the road. And I don't know that I could have cultivated that without that kind of background. And I think it also hard because I think that background's going away for a lot of people. And so I often wonder, like, how do people, is it genetic? Is it, how do you cultivate that in today's day and age? But you obviously did in a big kind of way, right? So
yeah, I think the world has changed so much, even in just our lifetime, let alone, your father and your grandfather. I think we have it so much easier. We work long hours, we have a lot of stress, but so much of what we do is now, on the computer and, the blue collar jobs, the plumbers, the electricians, the farmers, the shipmen, all of these jobs seem to be going away. And I think unfortunately a lot of the grit that is associated with those jobs is also going by the wayside.
100%.
And I think about that even when in raising my children on our property is, a big part of their life is doing chores.
Yep.
I say you don't eat until the horses eat, and getting up early, and it doesn't matter if it's cold, doesn't matter if it's rainy, it's just got to get done. And hopefully, instill some values that way. But
with that, I think one word we picked so our oldest boy, Ryder, our youngest boy, Rhett, and we had Ryder, we had that like, hey, what do we want this kid to be, and like how are we going to foster that? And our big takeaway word was always just capable. And I think what you're doing, in terms of creating those processes and understanding, value in other things outside of self is a really unique characteristic.
Those life skills of being able to fix equipment, fix a truck, ride a horse, put up fence, be a plumber, be an electrician, do like basic things. That's something, as I said in my own interview, is like I knew none of that stuff.
Yeah, I laugh because that trick. I got to tell the story. So you talk about that. So one thing, we got a chance, and my mom and dad always we didn't have a lot of money, but we didn't know it, right? And so we just did, and they let us do and experiment and make mistakes. And so I had a friend in high school. He had a Mustang GT, loved it. Flipped the Mustang GT, wrecked it. So I bought it from him for like $600. My brother and I, we took it all apart and got it running in and whatever, and sold all the parts, right? And so the chance to make a little extra money. Well, in that, I learned that on these 90 model Mustangs, you peel back the trunk and there's a push button that cuts the fuel off if you hit a bump too much or you flip the vehicle, and then all of a sudden it starts working. So fast forward, you're talking about being capable. I'm on Texas A&M's campus, and I'm walking to class. And there's this attractive college girl, and she's trying to get her vehicle started, right? And there's two college guys really trying to help her, right? One's trying to jump her off and this and that. And I walked by, and we had to work on so much stuff, growing up, that I could tell by hearing it. I'm like, no, it's getting electricity. It's not getting fuel. And I'm like, so I walked by. I'm not going to say nothing. Then I walked by, and I pulled one of the kids to the side, and I could tell he was crushing on her heart. I'm like, look, open the trunk. On the left-hand side, there's a red button underneath the carpet. Trust me. Push the red button, jump back in, and start the car. I kind of walk off, and he's looking at me like, this guy knows there's no button in the trunk. Pulls it off, starts the car, hero. And I'm like, dude, I just wingman that guy. He owes me. But anyway, it's stuff like that I enjoyed it. It's fun.
So you're at A&M. You're the first in your family to go to college. You realize that there are all these opportunities there for you. Where was your focus? What was your mind at that time?
Man, that was an interesting deal because it was like so much was coming at me so quick, right? And I, started out in ag and biomedical sciences, and was working towards the vet deal, and I realized like I didn't want to be a vet. I really wanted to be in marketing, and specifically I wanted to be in products. At 5th grade, my dad was always really busy, so my mom actually took me on my first deer hunt and harvested my first deer, and I got really big into watching cassette tapes of Big Buck Hunter, right? And so I taught myself how to do archery, and kind of funny. I wanted to get into marketing, didn't really have the grades to move into the business school, so I moved into wildlife and fisheries and got a minor in business. But really, I like to joke that I majored in archery. We were doing a kinesiology archery class, and it was just a normal for grade, whatever. A guy walks in and he's got a bow, like a nice setup bow, and he's shooting like competitively. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know A&M had an archery team. So I walked over to the coach, I remember, and I said, hey, what's that guy doing? He said, oh, he's on the archery team. So I can shoot better than him. I know I can. What do I got to do? And like, well, you got to own all the equipment, and then come back.
And how did you know that? Had you been shooting on your property?
Yeah, I mean, I had been since like 5th grade. My grandmother and my mom helped me buy a bow, and we'd shot on hay bale, and I taught myself how to deer hunt with one. I'm like, I put a lot of hours in archery just by myself, and kind of self-taught. Mm-hmm. And so I spent that next summer, working on the farm, and we hauled hay and whatever, and I bought a bunch of used bow parts off eBay. When eBay, this is 2000. It's been 04-ish time frame. So I just bought a bunch of used parts off eBay, got this bow together, went to a local archery shop, and I remember the first time I used one of the specialty releases, I shot an arrow through the ceiling. Like, oh, this is not going to work, right? So I got it all going, and went out for the team and ended up basically majoring in archery is what I like to say. And I finished 13th in the country in outdoor archery at the college level.
Was this like a D1 sport?
Yeah.
So you were 13th in the country.
In the men's compound, yeah.
D1 archery.
Yeah,
wow.
And it wasn't scholarship on the men's side, but it was on the female side.
Okay.
At A&M at the time, and that ended up landing me basically a job at the archery shop, which ended up putting me at Bowtech in Oregon.
So you get a job at the local archery shop.
So I get a job at. That's kind of a funny one too. And so they're bringing Gander Mountain to town. So if anybody listen to this and likes like sporting stuff, Cabela's, Bass Pro Academy, like those kind of things. There was a company called Gander Mountain. They're since closed down, but they were a big one, big catalog company, one of the first to do catalog sporting goods stuff. And they were coming to College Station and they were interviewing for new employees. And I'll never forget, one of the questions was like, tell us what your favorite reloading load is, to answer these questions. Man, shoot, I've been reloading too. I knew all these answers. And so I ended up getting a job as the archery lead for the new opening Gander Mountain. And, my wife and I had just gotten engaged. She was an overachiever, finished school a little early, and I was finishing. I didn't take a victory lap, but I was just finishing my normal lap, right? And started working there, and really, it wasn't what I wanted to do long term. I just loved products, and I wanted to do something in that space that really set a mark. And that was my singular focus, and I can track that back to 5th grade. I want to do something in the outdoor space that changes the game, right? And so I'm at the archery shop, and this old man walks in, and he's got a crossbow. And I didn't care two rats about crossbows. They were dangerous. I didn't want anything to do with them. Yeah. But I gave the guy attention, and was genuine customer service with him. And at the end, he was telling me he needed to go see this, other archery shop in Texas. Well, shoot, we didn't have MapQuest and all that kind of stuff. Wasn't even a thing at that time. So I went to my truck, and my mom had always made me carry a physical map. Right. Yep. So I had the physical map. I marked where the old man was going. I handed it to him. Didn't think nothing of it. And he said, "You mind helping me carry this bow to the car?" Yeah, sure. And so he said, "Well, I couldn't ask you inside there, but what do you think about Oregon?" I don't know anything about Oregon. What do you mean? I had hardly ever been out of Texas, And he's like, "Well, I own this small little company in Oregon called Bowtech. What do you think about coming and working for me?" And I'm like, small company. At the time, it was the world's largest archery company. And so I just accidentally met the owner of Bowtech.
It's one of those sliding doors moments in life.
And it was the week before our wedding. So they flew us up, big Christian company, flew me and my fiance at the time up there and put us up separate rooms, did the whole deal, and interviewed us both, basically. We came back the Wednesday. So that was Wednesday before we got married. Came back on that Thursday. We had a rehearsal dinner on Friday night at a house that we thought was going to be our forever home.
And your wife is totally fine 3 days before the wedding. Sure, let's go to Oregon.
She's great. I mean, like I said, she's loves living in the. She doesn't herself chase the moment, but she loves the fact that I kind of will make sporadic decisions and go. And anyway, so we come back and we say, man, we're going to take that job in Oregon. And my father-in-law, and you've met my father-in-law. So my father-in-law, during the prayer at our wedding, just and protect them as they go to Oregon. Whew, mic drop. Right? It's like everybody in the wedding is like, what? You're moving to Oregon? And so we went on our honeymoon.
So you hadn't told anybody?
No.
You told your parents?
We didn't. Right? Well, my parents knew a little bit because we'd been in Oregon and stuff, but it just happened so fast. It was just like everything was coming at us.
Gosh.
And it was really interesting because we left, went to our honeymoon in Hawaii. My wife's a real estate agent at the time. And basically, while we're on our honeymoon, she sells this house we had just bought while we're in Hawaii. So we come back, we've sold the house. And this is the same, like this is next week, right? We pack it up, and my mom and dad, great people, they bring an enclosed trailer, and we pack all of our stuff and drive to Oregon with nowhere to live.
Wild. This is literally like the day after your honeymoon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We get back. We still to this day, and I have one of the towels still. It's ratty, and now it's like a towel for our dogs and animals. But we packed we were young, dumb, and stupid, right? We packed everything in the trailer. So like we didn't have a bed or nothing to sleep in that night. So we're like, what are we going to do? So we had 2 beach towels in our pack luggage from Hawaii. And we're like, well, I guess we're sleeping on the beach towel. So we slept on beach towels the night before we drove to Oregon to move there.
So we, my wife and I, the first night that we were in Paraguay, and in Paraguay they build all of the homes out of concrete, and every single day there's
like cinder block, or
it's like cinder block, and so every single day is super hot, and so I wasn't thinking anything about the nighttime being cool in a cinder block house
in a refrigerator, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely freezing. But so we get these inflatable mattresses, and my only experience in life with an inflatable mattress is you have like the electrical pump, right, that pumps them up. And my wife is like, we didn't have that, but we just had the inflatable mattresses. And my wife's like, oh, let's just blow them up. I'm like, I'm not blowing up an inflatable mattress. We'll be here for half an hour. And so we end up sleeping on these uninflated, inflatable mattresses on the ground. And I say to this day, I grew up in New England. That was the coldest night of my entire life. I mean, I think I had every single coat on. It was just absolutely freezing.
But at least you had like a dedicated spot on the floor. It was better than the floor.
We had a roof over our head, so that was something.
I love it. That's awesome, man. It's like those kind of stories though that like, I mean, they make it. You look back and like those are the
toughen
things you
up
remember.
A little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And there was one of many times my wife ended up being right because she blew up that thing in like 10 minutes. Like,
you're like, man, I should have just done that.
I should have just listened to her.
I love it.
So you're at Bowtech, and what is your job there now?
So that was, I'm going to call it, man, I learned so much. I learned so much there. It was interesting because we showed up, didn't have a place to live, found out like in that part of the world, like month-to-month rentals didn't exist and stuff. So we like lived in basically Section 8 housing, which was crazy. And we took that job, and I tell people now, it felt stupid. I wanted so bad to be in the industry. They could have wrote down on the paper, hey, your job offer is this big goose egg. And I'd be like, heck yeah, let's go, Yeah. And so, I mean, I think my first job there paid like $20,000 a year. I mean, it was nothing.
Oh,
my wife didn't have a job.
It's like McDonald's money.
Yeah, I mean, we just took it, right? Because I knew that the outdoor industry is so small. Like I always laugh. I'll say that I work with the same 35 people. They just shuffle the deck around as to who they're working for. And so we did that. And the owner, his name was Dwayne Tiller. And so they had, he called it a like Tiller Gauntlet, and I appreciated it. He basically, there's me and like 3 other guys kind of started at the same time, and he'd put us in all the different departments, and we worked like 4 a.m. string shift to like close on the pro shop, and you just rotated through the departments, and it was long days. And then basically he would pull you into his office and with like whoever the lead was in that deal and ask you like questions about that department, and specifically like and he cared a lot about the people that were in that department, and when you could answer all the questions, you didn't have to go back to that department. So I learned really quickly how to answer all the questions, the 4 a.m. shift and the production shift. And then ultimately I ended up as a bridge basically between engineering and new product development and marketing. And so, anybody who's seen some, your materials of Kat, that's where I met her. And so she kind of worked on the marketing side. I kind of had the engineering team. And what I did is I would more or less hear what sales and marketing wanted to do with the project, formulated it into kind of a Gantt chart kind of world, go to the engineering, understand what they needed to do. And then I would order the parts, source the parts, get the best deal, and help test the parts. And then when we finished, I'd basically hand off to marketing, like, here's the next thing coming. Here, purchasing, here's all the parts to order and the people you need to contact.
What was the most valuable part of that experience that
Yeah.
you took away from working at Bowtech?
Learning how to talk to people on the phone. And I think that was an interesting skill. We here and negotiate this for us. We can only pay this much. Right? I didn't know. I mean, it was like go to ThomasNet, get the phone book, and then find people and blind call them and say, hey, I'm such and such at Bowtech. I got this project. We need to do it. This is and learning how to kind of negotiate. And at the same time, I learned power of brand. I think there. So like. When I called and said, hey, I'm with Bowtech, I immediately got attention. Mm-hmm. And so I started really learning like, oh man, so there's more to this company thing than you got to have great products, but the more brand value, clout, cachet that your brand had, just the more leverage that you had in general to do anything.
It's so hard to build that brand equity and so important to keep it once you have it.
And it's extremely difficult to describe it to people.
Mm-hmm.
And even how to you and I know off camera have had some different topics about that. It's like, well, what is marketing? What is brand value?
Yeah.
What is the number metrics that you can put on that? You can't, and it's like almost something you can taste. But
I always say marketing is the science of influence. Yep. It's the brand equity. It's kind of like trying to answer the question, when did you become cool in high school? Can you pinpoint it? It's just like, no, there's just kind of a turning point there.
I love that. That is so cool. Hey, and really, and to be it's funny, like kind of rolling forward a little bit like that. That's what we learned with Horizon is like there was a point where I can look back and say, oh, now I know when it was. Mm-hmm. But during it was like, man, we just want to be cool. Can we just like be near cool people?
And you don't know how cool you are at any given point, until you, like you say, until you look back and you say, oh, that was a pretty big milestone, I guess, mm-hmm. That we crossed. Yep. And there's always that sense of insecurity, a sense of paranoia with your brand as it's going to market. If you're a founder or you started this thing from scratch, it's like one of your children. You wrap your arms around it, and you don't want a bad review. You don't want somebody to have a terrible experience, and you're constantly shepherding the brand along that way. And you're not always perfect with it, but it takes 20 years to build a reputation. That saying, 20 years to build a reputation, and 1 minute to lose it.
Exactly.
I think that's always a challenge. And you see it actually even with recent experiences like with Bud Light or Target. You can alienate your client base,
immediately. Well, and today and like now it's so much easier, right? Like, and it's hard because I think too, us as consumers and just in general, the consumer feels so much more power now. It's like, oh, well, if I don't like this or that about you, then I just put it on social and ruin your brand, right?
That's right.
And so it creates this interesting dynamic of making sure that you're customer focused,
mm-hmm.
And I think people in our space underestimate like the value of that. I mean, good customer service, and I'm not saying we have the best customer service. I mean, I know that we have spent a lot of time and effort to be better customer service, and I can say with confidence outsized than our competition has, and just the rewards of that are major.
I want to come back to that, but so you're at Bowtech.
Yep.
What you end up leaving? What happened there?
Man, yeah. So they got acquired by Savage. So I actually got some time on the gun space there too, and it was interesting because when you're young, married, and you're far away from family, like you're using all your PTO to go home and see family. You're not like actually like doing any.
Were you doing
traveling.
any hunting in Oregon?
A little bit, but man, you want to talk about hard. And I finally went back last year or the year before and got a black-tailed deer. I learned so much. I'll tell you a couple different hunting stories on that. I learned so much about the people and how they hunted in the West, and like it shaped a lot of like what we do product-wise. But yeah, I mean, we got there and I wanted to go elk hunting. Yeah, I'd never really been elk hunting, didn't really know much about it. And one of the guys from Warranty was like, "Yeah, man, I'll take you on an elk hunt." And shoot, when I thought elk hunt, like I had been on one hunt that was kind of like private land, and there was elk, and it wasn't that far. It was pretty flat country and whatever. Man, we were like backpacked miles in, and we're going through, and all of a sudden see this elk. And the guy I was with, his name was John Nelson. He was a 3D state champion in Oregon, and he's like, "Oh man, there's elk. Yeah, I can see him." He's like, "How far are they?" 90 yards. Okay, wow. Drills this thing, and I immediately remember thinking, we're in a different game, because in Texas it was very much like tree stand, 20-yard, bow blind. You used a different style of product, and I immediately understood the value proposition that Bowtech was doing in their product and who their customer was. And people would brag about close shots at Bowtech versus like far shots, far different from how I grew up. And so that was a really unique experience, which really made me want to blacktail hunt. And
so this is an interesting, I guess, exploration for me when it comes to product development, in the sense of, you look at Bowtech, were they creating their customer base based on the products that they were producing, or were they producing products based on what their customers were looking for?
That's a great question. And I think I'm going to answer it a little bit different. They were, and this is some of the things that I pull from Horizon, and it's worked for us too. They just wanted to be cool for the sake of being cool, right? And so when they did edgy things on purpose, and that was more the focus. Is like, if we're really edgy and we're front of the line, we're cutting edge at the time, our customers will be forgiving when we miss, right? So if we hit like grand slam, home run, oh dang, we hit a little single here, our customers are going to be forgiving about that. So we called it the campfire mentality. So, the time we were competing against a company called Matthews, if you're in the archery space, they're a big dog, still a big dog. And if you were a new archer, you could go buy a Matthews bow and go to deer camp, and people are like, got a Matthews, good job, bud. And you were cool immediately. If they bought a Bowtech, we had to give them a real good reason to buy it. And then we had to be so cool that they were excited about explaining to their friends why they didn't buy Matthews. Yeah. And I learned that, when you come up with products, like you need to know who you're doing it for, but more it becomes about like who that person is, not about like what they're doing. And so like with Horizon, we do edgy flutes and different color things. And then, I'm sure we'll talk 22 Creedmoor, but like we looked at saying, oh, what are the things that people say you can't do? Oh, well, fluting affects accuracy. Well, let's prove it. Right. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of the Bowtech. It was almost a chip on your shoulder, like, oh, well, bows can't be fast. Oh, well, we'll show you they can be fast. Oh, they can't be comfortable and fast. Oh, well, we'll do that too. And so it's just a mindset of proving people wrong. And I think growing up, from the farm and all that, and I just ate and breathed like that part of it.
It's funny that you say that and talk about the campfire in the sense of like, for me, whenever we have family friends that come over and they bring their kids over, if I really think about sort of what the sequence is of the conversation when the husband comes over, it's always, did you get another gun? Like, what new piece of equipment did you get? The first 4 hours are always like, oh, check out this new gun. Have you shot this? No, well, we got to go shoot.
Exactly.
It is. Boys like their toys.
Exactly. Well, and like them at the core, right? It's like who people end up being. And so like, that was really.
And you can see that from the time that your boys are like 2 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, they are playing with guns. They are playing with trucks. They're playing with swords. They're like so into anything that is mechanical or moves or can shoot or whatever.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. My 5-year-old right now, he's a handful. And what he wants to do is saddle the horse with his cap guns and ride around like the Lone Ranger, right? And he's just reckless about it, and I love it. And so, but so we're at Bowtech doing that deal, and learned a lot. Got a chance to shoot some archery. And back to why we left, we're in the engineering room. Big, man, in this big room, picturesque windows. There's one big giant bullpen, and the engineers and myself. And it rained all the time. And people always talk about how it rains all the time in that part of the world. And I was like, it's not that big of a deal. But I remember consciously going to the window when the rain stopped, and like everybody was absorbing sunlight like a plant. And I remember calling my wife and said, we got to go to Texas. I've hit my spot.
There's not enough vitamin D.
I cannot see the sunlight, just as little spurts, and I'm done with the rain. And so at that time, it was neat because, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit. Her family company was involved in a large corporation and such. And
Casper Companies, which is the parent company of Texas Precious Metals and
ultimately Horizon Firearms. So we'll roll all that back in. But and so, great. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you should interview, but Uncle Doug, who's on the TPM, the new video, right? Yeah. So Uncle Doug flew up to Oregon, and Caspers were in the process of acquiring a truck accessory distribution company that was defunct, and old Casper companies a good sum of money, and I was doing buying activities, and basically, so they gave us the opportunity to come back and interview with the company to become a buyer for Croft Distribution.
Yeah, and the company that Casper's owned was Ranch Hand.
Ranch Hand, yep.
So tell listeners a little bit about Ranch
Yeah,
Hand.
so
Everybody in Texas knows Ranch Hand.
Yeah, I mean, so Ranch Hand more or less is the Kleenex of all grill guards, right? So if you're driving down the road and you see one of those big black bumper replacements on the front of the truck and you see the silver square tag, it's a Ranch Hand.
Yeah.
And they more or less created the market around protecting your truck
from hitting deer, or if you fall asleep on the highway or whatever.
Bump gates, cows.
These are not the little poodle catchers you get on Mama's minivan.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, it was the real meal deal, and that's a fun and super fun company, And so so we came back and we did truck accessory distribution. Learned a lot about distribution, and again, use that kind of relationship deal to learn a lot about buying stuff and selling stuff and margin and
so you were getting much more into the weeds on the financial side of, as you're kind of rounding out your skill set.
Yep.
You are an engineer, you're a tinkerer, you go to school, you now have marketing and engineering experience, and now you're getting into the weeds on the financial side.
Yep. And it was like use the relationships to buy the right things, make sure we don't get over it. And so then that's my first exposure to inventory and turns and oh man, we got to negotiate this particular co-op deal because we need an extra point margin here and there. And
there's always the challenge too with inventory where if you buy X amount of inventory, it can reduce your inventory cost by 10%.
Yep.
But if it takes you a year to turn it,
exactly.
there's a cost of capital
exactly.
associated with that inventory. So it's just always this delicate kind of balancing act. You got to know what your cost of capital is. You got to be really tight on what your turns are to know whether or not this is a good deal or a bad deal, or whether or not the deployment of capital is well used there.
And I think what was interesting about distribution and acquiring, I'm gonna call it a defunct distribution company, you could physically see that. And what I mean by that, so I remember, we walked in first day and everything was on MS-DOS green screen. Like they weren't even using Excel so like you would print off on this big roll printer a stack about yay big for lift kits, right? So lift kit takes this part, that part, and this tire, and you would go pages and pages and highlight them, and then you would spend hours 10 keying them into MS-DOS, right? And I remember we were talking about making good buys or what to buy or not. And I remember the first time I walked out into the warehouse, and there was a rack of fiberglass 1997 S10 runner side step things, and I'm like, oh my god! And this is think about this. This is 2009, so I got 97 S10 parts. I'm like, we will never ever get rid of these. And so it freaked me out a little bit. I'm like, I won't be the guy that I can't be the guy that buys old stale parts. And so it was interesting to be able to see that concept actually.
It would be really interesting to just go around to every, say, manufacturing company or even just general distributor in Texas and find out how much inventory is lost due to obsolescence every single year, and see what that variability looks like. Because the guys who are doing it great, maybe it's 1%, and there are probably guys that the shrinkage or the losses are 15%, 20%. I mean, it's got to be terrible, right? If it's not managed well, it can have a huge impact on financial performance.
Well, and it stopped. And what's been interesting, learning down the road, is it stops you from being able to do other stuff. So it's making these decisions and inventory stops you from doing cool stuff down the road. And that was a switch for me. I was like, oh, well, if we get too heavy in these things, maybe it's a short-term win, like the buy you were talking about. But then when I saw it as, that prevents me from spending time, effort, money, and creating new things, I don't want to do that. And so did that for a while. We had a cool opportunity. We got it. I'm going to say got it right. It wasn't perfect, but that business was running right. And with Ranch Hand was such a big, chip, I would say, in terms of card to have in the distribution game. And so we were our own distributor, and everybody wanted to distribute Ranch Hand. And so Croft got approached by one of their big competitors to acquire them. We sold Croft, and then that kind of launched me into doing wholesale marketing for Ranch Hand. So that's when I really got a taste of ad buys and influencers, web development. That's how I met a man who did, I think one of the first versions of TPM Central Command, right? And so it was a whole nother world of like rebrand and brand colors and, those kind of things. And so we did that for a while. And that's where we ultimately, the path kind of wise here. And when we started Horizon was at that same time frame. So,
yeah. And so the name Horizon comes from a reality show that you and your wife did, right?
Correct.
When does the reality show come in?
Okay, so this
did you skip over that?
No. This is about the time frame. So, we were working at Ranch Hand. So my wife at that time had been had got a job working in accounting, and then she was doing retail marketing. So we were like joint partners in the marketing side, and we were here in Shiner, and we went home for lunch one day at the Homestead House, which we both had some time in the Homestead House. And I turned on the Sportsman's Channel, and there's this North American Hunting for the Dream, right? And so it's this little kind of cheesy show where you filmed your own hunt and edited your own hunt. You got like a 6-minute episode, and then popular vote got you the opportunity to win your own TV show. So I remember thinking, man, I'm going to do that. And so I hollered, my wife's name's Cheris. I said, Cheris, we're going to do this. And she's like, oh, yeah, sure. And so on the way back to the office, man, I call the deal. I said, well, we got one more spot. We'll interview you next week. So at the same time, I turn around, I call Bowtech, and I call Stiller, who's now a company that we own, and I call Loophole. I say, hey, look, guys, had connections with you in the past. I think I'm going to do this TV show. If I do, will you sponsor me? Because I don't have money to do the show, per se. And this, I'm assuming this is how the world works. I saw it a little bit at Bowtech. Like you get the money from your sponsors, and you try to spend as least as possible to produce a TV show, and then whatever's left in the bucket, if any's left in the bucket, is kind of what you get to do. So, dude, we got the last spot on the show.
It's crazy.
And so what it finds us doing is doing ranch hand marketing by day, and then traveling on the weekends all over the country, filming a hunt, filming my wife shooting stuff, her filming me shooting stuff, and then burning the midnight oil. I learned how to video edit. And ultimately, I became a moderate expert at Final Cut, and we won the show.
Crazy.
And so now I'm sitting here going, okay, cool. We work in ranch.
So when you say win the show, it was based on just
popular
votes?
vote, yeah.
And so they said,
they called us and said, congratulations, you had enough popular votes to win Hunting with a Dream. Here is a 32-week contract for the Sportsman's Channel. Congratulations.
32 weeks.
Yeah, or 32 episodes. So which means,
okay.
So it was like 32 weeks was 15 episodes, basically, how they kind of split it up with a replay.
Okay.
And they said you have this many assets of commercials to sell, and if you sell those commercials, you can pocket the money, and then you get your own sponsorships and edit it and pay.
So they didn't pay you. So you don't get any money for winning. But you don't get any money on the show. You just get the airtime.
Correct. Which people don't realize in that world, because we did it 2 years in a row. So we did it free in 1 year, and then the next time we did it, I had to pay for a discount on the airtime, and it's super expensive. I mean, this was like 2009, and it probably cost $15,000 for baseline airtime. And at that time for us, that was a lot of money, right?
Yeah, and streaming really wasn't a big thing back. I mean, we were just starting to get off the ground a little bit with like Netflix. But you still had major broadcast media running pretty much everything.
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. So we would basically edit these shows and then mail in the little hard drive that they would put it on TV show.
And this is just very on brand for you, because if you don't know how to do something, you just figure it out.
Figure it out.
Video editing, sure, we'll just figure it out.
How hard can this be, right? So it's like get a Mac computer and learn the Mac computer, and so I mean it was interesting. And so kind of on the flip side, so we're doing that. We finished the first season.
And the name of the show was On the Horizon.
And so why it was on the horizon. So about that time, there was kind of a patriarch in the Casper, family heritage. Not Daddy Don, but it was kind of related to his wife and whatever. Carl was his name. And so we went to his funeral. And on the back of his, like the pamphlet at the funeral, there was a poem, and it's famous. I don't know who did it. I probably should know at this point. But it said, a horizon is nothing but the limit of your sight. Don't be limited. And I went home and I circled that, and I said, that's it. That's the name of the company, because we're going to do long range rifles, and we're going to do cool stuff because it's going to be cool. And it stuck. And so the name of our show, we call it, it was basically Ranch Hand Horizon, because we did a joint sponsorship deal with Horizon. So, and that's kind of where On the Horizon and the Horizon brand. And we actually used, if you look at our logo, it's basically a circle with 3 prongs in it, and then Horizon's written underneath it. And so our family brand, when our family came from Tennessee to Texas after the Civil War, it was basically 3 brothers that had nothing. So the 0 in the middle is they had nothing but each other. 3 brothers, nothing. And then my brand personally gets, because I'm the first son, gets 1 bar underneath it. So when you see Horizon written, it's our brand with Horizon written. We're far enough away. It is my personal cow brand.
Right.
And so
and when people talk about branding, you
I mean, it's literally a brand.
Yeah, college kids and around the country who hear this word brand, they're always thinking of a company. But in Texas,
it's a brand.
A brand is literally you're sticking hot steel and coals, and you're sticking it on a
I mean, we're registered
cattle,
registered with the county, and you know, my family's had it registered forever, and you can go back and see like in the county records. It's so cool. I love. And I hope it always stays like that. But you go down to the county courthouse and they pull out this big leather-bound book, right? Flip to the next open page and you draw and initial basically the brand that you want with a pencil, and then you sign it, right? And then it's yours. And so my aunt has done some family history stuff, and we have like, you can go back and look at the pages, and my great granddad or great great granddad, here's his drawing of our brand, right? You know, and so it was literally and I think with that, it was cool about that when we started the company is it was me, right? Like it was like fundamentally, it drew from pieces of my, you know, wife's history, you know, and then it drew from like the actual physical brand of our history. And and then that's kind of how we started it. So
you have this idea at this point that you want to start a gun company. Is that where you're at mentally?
I mean, to be honest, it was interesting. I wanted to start a company. And so actually the team name that we used on the show was Team Eclipse, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And it was kind of parallel with the Horizon piece. I was big into waterfowl at the time, and a male duck at a certain time
you were big into shooting waterfowl.
Shooting waterfowl, yeah. Hunting waterfowl, yeah. And so when a male mallard duck, once a year, he loses all of his feathers, all of his color, and loses the ability to fly for a small period of time. And when he's uncolored and coming out of that, it's called the eclipse phase. And so we were like Team Eclipse and whatever. And so I actually drew and tried to get a patent for what I called the duck puck, which is basically a decoy thing, and it didn't work. And so Horizon's going about the same time. We're doing the Ranch Hand TV show deal, and I get a phone call from a guy. We had started a website too. Created one of those, dude. I learned how to do Dreamweaver and created my own website.
That's better than me. My first one was GoDaddy.
Yeah, there you go,
point
man.
and click.
So like doing code on the side, you know. And anyway, the guy calls me and says, "Hey, these guns you're using, I mean, where do you get them at?" And I had a buddy in Wyoming. His name is Hazer Bulkley, and he had a Powder River, you know, gun company basically. And he had made us a couple custom guns, you know, custom at the time, which basically meant they were super accurate on a Remington 700 Action with a new barrel on them and a painted stock, right? Like custom at that time meant they were accurate. It didn't mean it was actually custom. And I was like, oh, people are actually watching what I'm using, and they want to use what I use. I bet I could sell one. So I call him real fast. Hey, can you make me a gun that I can sell? And he's like, well, yeah. He said, but I don't really want to do this much and whatever. And I will do the barrels, and I'll teach you how to do the rest, and you can handle all the rest of the stuff. I mean, shoot. So I got a FFL in the homestead house that I was in, and called the guy back and said, yeah. So
was that the address for the FFL? Was the homestead house?
That Horizon Firearms was started on the same property as Casper Companies, just 100 years later, and we had an FFL at the homestead house.
That's crazy. Yeah, and for those listening, after Derrick left the homestead house, I moved into the homestead house with my family when I moved to Shiner with that well that was like hand dug by Cheris's ancestors.
Exactly, man. And so it was, and that was cool part of the history as well. I was like, man, we're starting the company in the same place that like all the other stuff had started. And so told the guy what I would sell it to him for. He's like, yeah, I'll take one. And got it to him, and then quickly after that, another person started asking. So then I called Hazer back. Said, look, dude, we're gonna like do this thing. I'm gonna buy a lathe and all this stuff, and so at the time, my day job had also changed. So Ranch Hand was going through some transformations, and we thought at the time the company was going to get acquired. And I'm like, man, we can't both be working for the same company and get acquired. And so I actually took a job with Caselco which you remember that. So Caselco,
Electrocoagulation.
I sold electrocoagulation wastewater units to mines and municipalities to clean up chromium. And we basically
another Casper business, led by Doug Casper,
Yep.
and they had a bunch of patents on that technology.
Yep.
And
so I sold wastewater by day and helped them like get that company positioned right to sell. And as soon as Caselco sold, that was my marker. So Caselco sold. Horizon I had sold a couple guns. We wanted to move back to College Station. We started building a house, and we were like, I don't know, maybe a week away from my first son being born. So I said, hey, look, they're selling that company.
A lot happening.
Here's our time. So we moved, quit my job. My wife was working remote, and I moved a lathe and into the garage and started building custom guns. So yesterday we got a chance to do mountain hunting. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're on the plains here at with John X here, and we're going to be looking for Leshway.
Pretty amazing, hey?
you know, I've heard about all these companies that start in their garage, and your company is actually the only company that I know personally that literally started in a garage. And I've been in that garage. It was a nice garage.
Hey, it was a pretty nice garage. You know, the equipment wasn't the greatest. You know, I bought a bunch of cheap, Grizzly equipment. And then my favorite is, I had kind of a budget where I was going to buy machines, and I didn't have enough budget to buy a real Cerakote oven. So Cerakote is the kind of paint you put on it, and then it's a name brand, kind of like Kleenex, and then you bake this paint on there. So you have to have an oven that goes 350 degrees for an hour.
So let's pause for a second and talk about what is involved in the process of making a gun, because people are thinking, okay, I mean, this sounds like it's a big undertaking, right? And there are 4 or 5 pieces to a gun?
Yeah.
Okay, so you got the barrel, you got the trigger, the action.
You got the action.
The stock.
The stock, and then bottom metal if you include that not with the stock piece. Bottom metal is basically what holds the magazine.
So when you're starting this process of, hey, I want to make these custom rifles, you are having to go and source these 5 components.
Correct.
And then you are assembling them.
Correct.
You're putting your magic touch on them.
Yep.
And what is that magic touch?
At that point, man, it was interesting because it's a symbol. So like what was happening in the market at that time, and again, things just line up. So there was a company in the market that was really leading in the long range space. And so when I say long range, I want to define that. So most of the time, it was all about being accurate, 200 yards with a long shot. Well, these guys went out and said, well, we're going to shoot everything at 500, 1,000. And they were like purposely taking long shots. And it was lighting the opinion of people on fire and polarizing the market. And when I saw an opportunity, I'm like, man, they're going to polarize the market, but they're doing it at such a high price. I can build these custom guns with more, and all their guns look the same, right? You buy one, I buy one, there's no personality. So I can build that gun a little bit cheaper, and I can do individual flair on it so that your gun and my gun are not the same. And then when you go to hunting camp, you can explain, like, man, I designed
So the
this
value
myself.
proposition at the time was less expensive, much cooler looking.
Much cooler looking. Yep.
Same accuracy.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so what we did is we counter-positioned accuracy. So everybody's when people said custom up until about 2010, people thought about, well, if I buy a custom gun, I'm going to go get an old guy in a small shop to hand make me something that's more accurate. And it didn't look like anything. The whole reason I wanted it because it was more accurate. So we went and sourced really, really good parts. And then, like the gun here, and then we do like custom colors. And like custom at the time would be like, I would paint it tan and I'd spray some spooshes of green on it, right? Like that was wild. Like that's really custom.
Okay, so here is a Horizon rifle. This is a 22 Creedmoor?
It's 22 Creedmoor.
Okay, which we're going to talk about the 22 Creedmoor in a second.
So
but
this one is truly custom. So when we said custom, we said truly custom. So basically, let me talk about this gun a little bit. So 22 Creedmoor, and it's themed after our family. So on the other side of it, we can show a tight shot later. Then the other side of it, there's actually that brand on there is our logo. And it's the actual hot iron brand that came over with my family in 1876 on the wagon. We heated it up. This is pecan wood from our family tree that my great grandmother used to host picnics under, and it got struck by lightning. So we took a piece of the wood, cast it, and we made it like look new on the front end, and then old on the back end on purpose. Did a fake break here to show like the formation of it, hand painted rust, and then this fluting style. So this like cosmetic machining in the barrel was something that we leaned into hard because people said, oh, well, you can't have a custom gun with fluting, it won't be accurate. So we would find those pieces and do it on purpose.
For those listening like on iTunes or Spotify, what Derrick is pointing out is that the barrel of the gun has this spiral fluting at the end versus what your traditional just kind of straight looking flat
It
barrel.
almost looks like it's rifled on the outside.
Yes.
Right? And like a big giant drill bit or an ice bit is, kind of what we got.
And what are the advantages of that?
Man, a lot of it is it's real dang cool, right?
Besides the cool factor.
Outside of that, you take a lot of weight out. So we can get a steel barrel to weigh closer to a carbon fiber barrel. So if you're in a heavier, more stiff barrel will be more accurate. So I can use a heavier contour barrel to keep the accuracy and then drop the weight. And then
so it creates better rigidity?
Correct. Yeah, it maintains the rigidity.
I see.
Where like if I was going to do a small barrel versus a barrel this size, as the barrel heated up, your point of impact would change. So it leaves me having rigidity, gives a cool factor, takes out the weight, and then the other thing is depending on the flute style, it adds a little bit of surface area because you're adding concaves where you had basically material on the other side, and it helps the barrel cool from shot to shot a little faster.
Okay.
So it's all about gaining that accuracy, but again, we counter-position accuracy because the way we wanted to do it was every custom gun, if you're spending that kind of money, it better be accurate. That's not why you buy it. You buy it because you can and you want to express yourself, and that's kind of the
when you can't afford to miss.
When you can't afford to miss, man, that was like one of our first slogans. I love it. I like how you threw that in there. Yeah. So
So you're in your garage. You're kind of assembling. You're buying some parts. You're assembling a few guns. And how do you get your first customers? And I mean, you're showing us, an absolutely gorgeous, custom rifle, but this is not coming out of the garage day one.
Not day one, but we had some cool, for the time, some really cool stuff coming out. But yeah, first customer. So there's a forum called the Texas Hunting Forum. And again, I Rolodex from a Bowtech play. Bowtech one time, one of the owners told me that when they needed to make sure the brand was cool, they went around and they basically paid these guys across the country to jump on a forum and be like, hey, have you heard of this company Bowtech? They're doing this really neat thing. You should check them out. Oh, I saw them.
You're giving away trade secrets now.
Well, so now I'll stop there. But basically, they drove up talk about the product. And so I started getting heavy on the forums and I tried to give information that didn't feel exclusive. I was like, well, if these guys over here are charging from the information, if I can be subject matter expert and I can give you information and gain trust, then people will want to work with us. And so we started doing the stuff on the forums, and I loved it. My wife, she's a sweetheart. She would basically take our brand new son, and somebody would come to our house. They'd go in our living room and they'd go to this little office we had and sit down with me. And I'm a talker, and I've always been a talker. And she would basically keep our newborn son in the back room quiet for hours on end while I tried to drum up customers.
Were you doing it Texas style and inviting them over for dinner too?
Yeah, come on, yeah.
We're having beans and chicken.
And it worked though, because we ended up finding, I'll fast forward a little bit, like one of the guys that we found on there, his handle was Venatic. And Venatic is one of our rifle series named after him. Venatic means, something that pertains to or obsessed with hunting. And he was our customer number one. I'll never forget. He called me from Waco and he said, "It's David Stroud. I've seen you on the forums and I got this weird muzzle brake. I'm going to describe it to you, but I'm driving to you and I need you to build one before I get there." Oh, geez, man. So I'm out here trying to make this muzzle brake that I've never made before from some guy that I met on the forum who's driving an hour and a half to buy this.
How are you making a muzzle brake? What are you using for that?
I learned from Bowtech. They had taught me some lathe skills. And so I had a big chunk of barrel and a lathe and basically dimensions.
And a drill press?
Yeah.
Were you using that?
Just an old school Grizzly drill press. Is like couple $1,000 drill press and a lathe and some notes on a napkin that he had described to me on the phone. And I'm like, I have to do this because this guy's big on the forums, right? And since then, we've become great friends, and he's attributed to so much of our success. And actually, so paralleling forward to go, to roll in 22 Creedmoor, he was one of the first guys that asked for it.
The 22 Creedmoor is something that you and David Stroud pioneered.
Yeah, me, David Stroud, and some help from Hazer, basically pioneered this cartridge, right?
So the 22 Creedmoor, for those listening and not into hunting, is, as of today, I would say probably the fastest growing caliber in the outdoor space.
100%.
It has become a complete game changer. And what it was known as a Wildcat round for about 10 years. A Wildcat round is a non-SAMI approved round. That is just made in garages basically or wherever, whatever ammo company you can get to get some brass and some projectiles. And I want to hear about the genesis of those conversations, because you have developed an incredible reputation in the outdoor space. You know, today, you know, you've created a name for yourself as somebody that is pioneering a lot of new technology. So, and it all started with the 22 Creedmoor.
It all started with 22 Creedmoor. Yeah. So, you know, in Texas, there are a lot of hunting competitions. So I want to describe that for a little bit. So basically, in a 24-hour period, you and I would be on a team, and we would basically hunt for 24 hours and harvest, you know, predators. And then we'd take those predators to a weigh-in, and whichever team had the most weight essentially wins money, right? And it's big money in Texas. Like, they're the biggest one. We sponsor it now. It's kind of funny to start with it and now sponsor it, but it pays out, you know, over $50,000 for whoever shoots the biggest bobcat 3 times a year. So 50,000 3 times a year. So it's huge money. And so what we were doing is we were using a different cartridge, a 22 250, which is fast, great. A lot of people use them, don't have any hate for them.
Classic cartridge.
Classic, yeah. And what was happening is you shoot lightweight projectiles really fast, but what would happen if in these competitions, every minute counted. Right. And so there's a competition I remember doing with Hazer in Wyoming. We shoot this coyote, and he runs off, and I'm having to trail it. And we end up being late to weigh in by like 30 minutes. If you're late, it doesn't count. And we lost out on over $4,000 for being late. And I left there and I remember thinking we were going to shoot the biggest, heaviest, fastest thing and just KO stuff right there. And so we started messing around with a 22 243, another Wildcat, and David Stroud came to me and said, well, what about this Creedmoor deal? I said, man, we were doing the 6.5 Creedmoor at the time and took a lot of slack.
When you say, when he came to you and said, what about this Creedmoor deal?
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
So
translate that.
Yeah, so the Creedmoor case was something that Hornady had done and released, I'm going to say, in the 2009, 10, 11 window. And basically what they did is the Creedmoor name refers to the shape of the brass. And then basically you put the powder and the projectile in that. Now I have a 6.5, so the size of a neck of the bullet, and then the case, Creedmoor. And they basically pioneered the 6.5 Creedmoor, and it revolutionized the game. Low recoil, had really good ballistic performance, but at the same time, it kind of overlapped some old classic offerings and really offended some people.
And so 6.5 is the diameter of the projectile.
Correct. 6.5 millimeters, yeah. Yep. And so it's 0.264 inches, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was gaining traction, but it was really stepping on the toes of conventional thought. So people were like, oh, it'll never last because the 260 is better. Well, we just said, oh, we'll just lean into it. And so we were just pumping it on the forums. And so David showed up and said, well, what if we just neck down the 6.5 to a 22? We shove a 22 projectile in it. Now we have a 22 Creedmoor. It'll be fast, flat, whatever.
So just about the same amount of powder, correct?
Yeah.
So same amount of gunpowder in the brass.
Yep.
Smaller projectile. Goes a lot faster.
Really, really fast. Which fast in the world of hunting predators, I always like to tell people you are trying to shoot something the size of a 2-liter bottle at an unknown distance that's moving, right? And so you just need margin of error. Everything you can do to get you margin of error gives you more hits on target. And so we made one, and it fed, so actually the bullet came up out of the magazine, and it fed and cycled and performed better than the 22 243 that we were using. We're like, man, this might actually work. And so I built one for me, one for David, and David went out, of course, put it on the forums, and it just took off. And so we started building more and building more.
So were you then... So were you buying the components also to make the ammo?
Yeah.
So you had like a Dillon press?
Yeah, exactly. I had a Dillon press, bought a Dillon 650 press.
And you just started buying powder and projectiles and getting the brass and loading it.
And then we were really going after the kind of wildcatters, right? The people who wanted to load and stuff. And I think what really sort of flipped the switch is we had an old flat track racetrack in our hometown, right? And I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. When you win a flat track race, the people who competed against you are allowed to buy your motor because you're not allowed to spend more than a certain amount on your motor, so that you're not cheating. They buy your motor and they take it out of your car and run home, right? Well, the predator market started to kind of act like that. So David and them would go to these competitions and they'd win them. Man, what is David's strategy? He's using a 22 Creedmoor. Well, some of the guys that we were working with, David, they now had 22 Creeds. Well, they would sell theirs to a competitor they just beat and then call me and want another one. And I'm like, oh, this is really interesting.
Because there's no other gun manufacturer making a 22 Creedmoor.
And so now all of a sudden, the teams that were winning money were buying 22 Creedmoors and using Horizon guns. And so it just started getting really popular.
Now, were you playing at that point with different loads, different projectile sizes, trying to dial in the ballistics.
Yes, and trying to dial in the ballistics, and at the same time, there's some really interesting science between like twist rate of the barrel. So like the inside of a barrel is twisted, right? And it spins the bullet so many revolutions per inch, right? And so if you spin a bullet too fast, it's kind of like a top. It'll literally explode before it gets downrange. If you spin it too slow, it wobbles like a duck football and doesn't hit the target appropriately. So there's a fine range in it's too fast, too slow, and so we mess around with twist rates and loads to get it just right. Partially luck, and we'll talk about that later. But partially luck and a lot of tri-storming, and
a lot of tri-storming.
Tri-storming.
What is tri-storming?
It's kind of like brainstorming, but instead of just thinking about it, you just do it.
Never
heard that?
Never.
Yeah, you tri-storm fast, So and so a lot of it was that, and it kind of started to work, and so people kept asking us for ammo, so doing the doing thing. And we load up a bunch of ammunition, and it's more than I can make. And I know we're probably going too high pressure. There's no SAMI spec on this thing. I don't know. It's working, and it's killing coyotes, right? And we come around.
When you say SAMI spec, define what that is for the listeners, because that plays in later in the story.
So SAMI is basically, I'm going to call it our governing body for who gets to christen whether or not this is an official round, what the specs are for it, and if you're going to build it, how you have to build it.
And that way, other gun companies as well as other ammo manufacturers are now building to a standard spec.
Yep.
And when it's Wildcat, it's
free range. And the thing about it is rare that a Wildcat ever ends up being SAMI approved, because as a Wildcat picks up, you may do it a little bit different than me, and you may try a different twist rate and whatever. But because we created it, I had all these companies calling us and say, "What about that 22 reamer? What reamer are you using?" Well, I was strategic with working with like Proof Research and some of the other guys who were competitors, but I knew that if they were doing the same thing as us, that like the ammo would be somewhat standard and I could sell more ammo. And so, about that time, really you helped a tremendous amount. We got, Texas Precious Metals killing it over here. And we had several conversations about, ammo is basically metal that's also precious.
different precious
kind,
metal.
Right? And, you had the whole COVID thing where ammunition became so valuable, and you were more or less able to work out a deal with me with Spark and Peterson to load in volume. Yep. And create, you created essentially Texas ammunition, which still exists today, and it's some of the best. I'm telling you. And then we're doing. Anybody listening to this and wants that ammo, we're doing a throwback to Texas ammo, one run, 17,000 rounds.
Really?
Yeah, it's a good stuff.
So before we jump ahead to that, because I do want to get into the kind of the mass marketing now of 22 Creedmoor, but you're in your garage, and there are a couple things that are really driving a lot of the sales. One is the forums and David Stroud. You've created this new caliber that's lights out, and you're making the coolest looking guns in the market. And if anybody's just listening and not watching, just go to horizonfirearms.com. You can see a bunch of the cool different designs that they have. But you were really keen on making sure that these were works of art. And you were doing a lot of custom guns, some custom rifles for guys that were high end, doing safaris in Africa and all kinds of different things, right?
Yeah, we sat down, my brother and I. So at this time, my youngest brother came on and was working with me. Like, he'd be the one. He used to be the one in the garage doing the hard work where I was talking to the customer, right? And just making this thing work. And we sat down early on and said, "Look, I don't really care about building a gun for the guy who's buying it. What I care most about is that his grandkid." And I want to build something that when he passes to his grandkid, the grandkid remembers, well, this gun, granddad took on a, mule deer hunt and, XYZ. There's a great Roger Krager song that talks about like this old gun, and like that story really resonated with me. Like, that's what we need to do. That's what makes it different. And so, that's what we were doing.
I remember having a conversation with you around that time, and we were talking a lot about what your goals were for the company. And you mentioned it earlier, in this conversation, where you really wanted to do something special in the outdoor space. So some people start companies because they want to make a ton of money, or they want, to build, some kind of legacy business for their children or what have you. In your mind, you wanted to just create.
Yeah.
And you wanted the freedom to do that. Now you're self-financing the company. You're having some great success. I remember seeing you at Dallas Safari Club in 2014. It's like lines of people lining up because you had just built this incredible reputation of making the best guns. And, as we started having these conversations, it's like, how do you achieve your goals in a manner that is not, you're not going to be handicapped by, lack of funds or lack of resources. And as you're growing, you have all kinds of needs, from legal to IT to payroll to all the different administrative challenges that come with starting a company. Even more difficult in the firearms space with FFL and all the challenges dealing with the ATF and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
So I remember those early stage conversations and bringing your company back into the Casper company's fold.
Yep.
Which was kind of the next big
generation,
big change.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back and tell a little bit of that story, right? So at that trade show booth, Dallas Furry Club show that year, right? So we had a little bit of booth, and it had two little wooden tables on it, and we had this backdrop that was basically two big heavy boards that were skinned in shower board that had some pop-off graphics. And I never will forget, I bought the light off of Craigslist at the time. My brother and I built the tables. We built the stuff. The night before, the graphics broke, cost me all this money or whatever. And then at that show, the light that I bought on Craigslist caught on fire. Nobody knew it. It started to smoke, and I had to run behind and unplug it because it almost knocked the booth down behind me. So this is like scrapping it.
And this is Dallas Safari Club.
This is
so
big
anybody
time.
That's been to Dallas Safari Club, these booths are crazy expensive.
Oh, yeah.
All the biggest names in the firearms industry, all the most expensive hunts in Africa and Alaska, everybody's there.
Oh, yeah.
And you got your little startup.
I got my little thing.
Horizon booth.
I mean, we were bootstrapping. And I remember you and I had a conversation there about just, Casper companies wanting to be involved in Guns, Gold, and Grill. Mm-hmm. And really for me, like, I had big
grills for the grill guards.
Grills for the grill guards. You have the ranch hand side. And had a lot of aspirations for the product side, and had some patent stuff that I wanted to work on with the rings and bases and stuff. And Casper provided the cash and the structure to be able to do things that we wouldn't have been able to do.
To have the creative freedom without the difficulties.
Yeah. Well, and you told me two things, and I don't know if you remember this, and I always joke.
I don't remember anything anymore.
You're getting old, right? No, you told me two things, and I always tell Kat that one of these days I'm going to write a book and I'm going to put these two things in it. Is that you? I don't know if you remember this. You sat me down and said, if you've got a plan B, you never had a plan A. And I love that, and to this day I've used that on so many people. I'm like, what's your plan B? No, then you don't have a plan A. And so I live by that quite a bit. And then one time you told me, you said, look, you got a certain amount of fuel, and you have a rocket. And so you have the opportunity, you can let the rocket burn the fuel out and then have a dud, or you send the rocket when you've got the fuel, and you
got to have enough fuel to get that rocket off the launch pad.
Yep. So don't burn it just sitting there. Do something. And those are two super, super impactful moments. So it made sense for me, to roll it into Casper Company. And I'm a big, like, with our family, heritage and all that kind of stuff, and then the Casper family heritage, I'm a sucker for legacy, and that's one reason I love the legacy pieces on my gun. And so, being able to merge in with Casper and tell that long-term story, a 126-year-old company, and combine with, my family's legacy in Texas and our brand and stuff, it just made sense to try and focus on the next generation. And at that time, when I was back here, Daddy Don, who was kind of the patriarch of Casper companies, and we have it, you ought to see it in our office. We have it plastered huge on the wall. We sat down with him one time, and I said, Daddy Don, what is the secret to all this mess? He's like, how do you have a 100-year-old company? Like, what, talk to me about that. And he
before you get into that, let me just frame this a little bit. So Casper Companies, founded in 1898. Yep. One of the longest continuously operating manufacturing companies in the state of Texas. Yep. Made it through 2 world wars, a Great Depression, now a 5th-generation family business. Became known for actually making newspaper racks, which started lots of them. 90% of all newspaper racks in North America were actually manufactured by Casper companies. When that business was on the decline, that's when they went and bought ranch hands. So long legacy in Texas. And
all started at the Homestead House where Horizon started, weaving horse muzzles and corn shuck baskets.
And anybody that's been down to this part of Texas knows that you're far away from a lot of things. And like what Derrick was saying at the outset about, you have to learn how to be an inventor, a creator, a mechanic, all in one. And that's really the legacy of Casper Companies is just manufacturing and being creative. So this is kind of the background to this conversation.
Yeah, so I'm sitting basically with third generation, right, who had taken the company to next level, right? And he was probably at that time, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, came into work every day, always took the bank deposits, and I loved it so much because he'd come in my office every day with mail. He couldn't throw anything away. So he'd come in my office with mail, and he'd say, Derrick, I'm going to set this on your desk because it's way easier for you to throw away than it is for me. I just can't do it. And he'd cut up calendars and leaving them on. Just the whole deal, right? So he comes in and he's sorting through his mail.
I actually got a better one for you. Is he walked into my office, and I don't know how old he is at this time, 85 years old maybe. And you remember he never had a computer.
Yep.
And everybody is communicating with email. And so he would have all of the secretaries print out any email that came in. And, most emails are like one sentence or two sentences. And he said, Derrick, I don't understand this email thing. It's such a waste of paper.
I love it. I love it, man. That's a good story. But yeah, so he's sitting there, and he's across from me on the desk, and he's shuffling through his mail, and he pulls out the Shiner Gazette. He kicks his legs up like he always did in his coffee cup, and reading it. I said, Don, what's the secret to all this stuff? He rolls down his paper and looks at me and says, well, it's real simple. We don't make cheap, sorry product. He picks up his paper, and that was done. And I mean, there was no more to the conversation besides we don't make cheap, sorry, cheap, sorry stuff, or cheap, sorry product. And I was like, wow, it's as simple as you can just boom, tell me that, and we go back to reading the newspaper, and it was done, conversation. And so, anyway, it was good to be able to roll back with that kind of heritage.
I mean, and you can really distill just about any business into two things. One is you've got to have a good product.
Yep.
And two is you got to treat people the right way.
Yep. 100%.
That's it. That's business.
Yep.
It doesn't matter how big or how small it is. You got to have a good product, and you got to treat people the right way.
100%.
And you can't run out of cash.
You can't run out of cash. You got to hit go when you can hit go. Right. Exactly. Can't run out of cash. Don't have a plan B. But yeah, no. So, gosh, I don't even know where we were going from there. But yeah, that's how we ended up being part of Casper Companies, and and so at that point, it was full steam ahead with, go back to 22 Creedmoor there. So at that point, we're going full steam ahead. We create IOTA. So we literally launch a company based on like these rings and bases.
So let me interject there for a second. So, we talked at the beginning of the founding of Horizon. There's like 5 components that go into this gun.
Yep.
And what's the problem? You can't get the components when you need it. You got all these guys, all these orders coming in, and 14-month lead times, et cetera. So what do you do? What you have always done? Well, we'll just make it ourselves.
Yep. And I love that story too. And unfortunately, the individual I'm going to talk about has since passed away. But there's a company called McMillan, and McMillan was making all the stocks, right? And Kelly McMillan was the guy who owned it, and we were buying stocks from them, but the lead time was crazy. And like you said, you just collect cash, and you'd sit here and wait on parts, and then you turn it fast, and you got it. And there was just no way to scale that. And I remember I took an order for a customer for a specific color of stock, and told the customer it would be, 3 or 4 months or whatever lead time. And they went on the website, McMillan had that photo of that color in stock listed. A customer calls me back and shoes me a new one, telling me basically that I'm the one that's slow, and I'm sandbagged and all this kind of stuff, and they want to cancel the order. So I said, wait, hang on a second, let me call McMillan. So I call McMillan up. Say, hey, I'm one of your dealers. I ordered a bunch of stuff, and you got this color. I just ordered it. Just send me that one. I said, oh, well, it can, but it's full retail. What are you talking about? He said, well, that's our e-com. That's not for our dealers to use. So, you can buy it, but it's full retail. And I remember having a conversation about next DSC and telling Kelly McMillan, I just want you to be real clear that I am going to be one of your biggest competitors, and it starts like now. And we're just letting you know that. And by the next year, we had IOTA going, and we're making our own stocks because you just couldn't do it any other way. Yeah.
So I mean, you create IOTA from scratch. You eventually buy Stiller Actions. Yep. That's the second piece.
They were our first sponsor of the TV show, so we ended up acquiring them later. Yeah,
pretty incredible.
Yeah,
and all the while, 22 Creedmoor is growing. It's growing. And you go to YouTube, and it's all these guys with all of their videos, and it's just getting more and more and more popular. And as you mentioned earlier, so I start Texas Ammo. I start building a lot of relationships in the industry
with the big guys, not just like the little guys.
Yeah, the big boys. When you have capital, you kind of work with the big boys. And you had a bit of history with Hornady, and maybe you can share a little bit about how Hornady and Horizon
finally work together. Yeah.
The marriage to bring 22 Creedmoor, make it SAMI certified, and now take it to the mass market. I mean, it's just such an incredible story.
Well, and I want to start with what's so cool about Hornady is they're third generation, and they're Nebraska boys, and they work very similar to we do. It's your word's your word. If you don't need a contract, handshake, but what we say we're going to do, and we're going to do it in a big way, right? And I love the like swagger and image that Hornady has, right? And so when we started doing the 22 Creedmoor, obviously they created the 6.5, but we wanted Hornady, and I remember we would figure out what trade shows that Jason Hornady himself was going to be at. And I would just go stand in their booth like a little,
It's like stalking a girl that you like.
Yeah, it would basically. 100%. I would sit there like a lost puppy, hoping that he would walk by and, hey, Jason, have you thought about the 22 Creedmoor? And I know to this day we joked about it because, he's like, he wouldn't remember me, But I can say that there's been at least 3 conversations in their booth at different shows that I have said, hey, Jason, what about the 22 Creedmoor? He goes on by, right, And so what I figured is I was never going to get to Hornady. And so we started going to SHOT Show, and there's a guy named Ryan Damon who has become a great friend of mine. He was a new engineer for them and about my same age. And I was like, you know what, I want to meet somebody there. He was like, you want to be part of the cool kid, right? You're like the band, I don't know if I can say that. You're like the band kid that you just want to go to a football party, right? Mm-hmm. And so I said, Ryan, let me take you to lunch. And so Ryan and I started going to lunch every SHOT Show, just catching up. And so I said, I'm going to send you a 22 Creedmoor. So we did a real cool Hornady-themed 22 Creedmoor and just shipped it to him. And he started working on ammunition and new projectiles. This has been 12 years before we launch it. And him and I are testing stuff constantly. And it never got off the ground. Well, you got to understand like the dynamics of the industry. So we're working on 22 Creedmoor. Federal releases the 224 Valkyrie, and all of a sudden the 22 market's now covered up with this Valkyrie, and Hornady needs to make projectiles to cover this Valkyrie. Well, 22 Creedmoor gets put on the side. It'll never work. There's problems with it. It's too much power. It's too fast. Nobody will ever want it. It gets parked.
And like Hornady and Federal, they're kind of like frenemies.
Frenemies. They're real strong frenemies. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and dude, the whole space is like that. The ammo space is even worse. Like, I'll buy primers from you, you buy brass from me. I'll make your projectiles, you load them for me. Like, it's frenemies to the nth degree. And so we do this deal, and there's another, and I won't mention them here, but there's another ammo company that approaches Texas Ammo, or we approach them to do a 22 Creedmoor big release. It needs to be SAMI approved. If we don't get it at SAMI approved now, it may not last, right? And so we're about to have this meeting. We're like a week, and this is one of those God things, right? We're like a week away from having that meeting, and I'm at Dallas Safari Club Show. Back to Dallas Safari Club Show. We got a real booth here now, and we're.
And I happen to be in Dallas,
yeah,
not at the show, but I
which
just
is
randomly,
crazy. You just happen to be there, yeah. And so I go to the bathroom and I'm drying my hands, and Neil Davies walks in. Anybody in the industry, Neil for me, as somebody, as a marketing guy in the industry, like, if he sees this, whatever, like, really look up. Like, he is the guy. Like, if you want to look at who is the guy who controls marketing in the industry, he's the guy, right? And I've always loved what they've done there. And so like he walks in, and he's like washing his hands, and he's like, "Hey, Derrick." And I don't know that he knows me from Jack. And so I don't say anything. And it was just very unlike me. But I'm like, okay, whatever. I just got to get out of here. Oh, my gosh, it's Neil Davies, He's like, dude, you're the only other dude in this bathroom. I'm talking to you. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And he said, man, how's that 22 Creedmoor going? I said, it's good. Let me tell you how good. And you need to make ammo. Like, these are the numbers we're selling at ammo. And what I love about Neil is he's, I think he grew up in South Africa, has that like mentality. He's like, yeah, screw it, we're doing this thing. I'm calling Jason right now, right? And so we end up,
and we met that night.
Yeah, we end up in I don't even remember what it was, a really awesome like speakeasy in Dallas somewhere, and literally get the 22 Creedmoor project started 2 or 3 days before we were about to do it with somebody else. And fast forward, we end up at SHOT Show talking to Jason Hornady about the 22 Creedmoor and how we're going to launch it and such. And because of what you've done with Texas Ammo, they knew we were serious. They knew we were a serious distributor. And I think a lot of people don't understand, like, Texas Ammo is not just a fly-by-night distributor. I mean, we distribute a lot of ammo from all the big guys. And so we had the history, we had all the sales, and could support it, and then put our money where our mouth is and put in a humongo order. I guess if you can even say humongo.
I mean, this was one of those. We believe in the product, we believe in the company, we believe in Derrick, and we're going all in on 22 Creedmoor. Now, if you remember at the time, I forget how many employees were at Horizon, but there was no way Horizon was going to be able to make enough guns to meet the demand once all the ammo was out there. So we started having conversations with other, we won't name them here, but other gun companies and saying, hey, this is coming. It's going to be big.
Yep.
Can you commit to rolling out the rifles? And, for those listening, this is always one of the challenges with, the firearms space is that, if you're a rifle manufacturer and you have a new caliber, you are very much beholden to the ammo manufacturers to ensure that there's ammo.
Yep.
But if you're an ammo manufacturer and you want to release a new caliber, you got to make sure that you got gun companies that can make the guns, or you're not going to sell any ammo. Exactly. So there's this constant collaboration between the two. And so here we had Hornady, who was excited about the product. Horizon's making phenomenal guns, but not to the volumes that we felt like the market was going to need. So we started having these conversations with these other gun companies, and
we thought we had it in the bag. We were like, we got
done,
this thing.
Done. We're in Vegas. We got it. And lo and behold, they were all having manufacturing problems. They were supply chain issues. There's backlog. We got this roadmap. There are layers of bureaucracy. And it was like, well, it's like being back on the farm in Boyd, right? I guess we're going to have to do it ourselves.
Well, and we can compare with, I don't know if you remember, now our largest distributor in the nation, Horizon's biggest customer. Basically, we had a phone call with them, and they literally said, we'll do a couple hundred. And we went, the biggest distributor in the country is only going to do 200? Like, what are we going to do? And I remember you had that call afterwards, and you pitched, and I'm very much appreciative to this day, pitched to the C-suite group, like, we literally have to do this. We have no choice. We have to do this. And I fast forward, and their initial order was more than 222 Creedmoors.
Yeah. And you knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was just, a really, really interesting thing. So yeah, we catapulted in a fast kind of way from being a custom gun company only to what we call our core rifle line. So we have our select custom line, which we still only build 3 a month. We draw them on paper, or we draw them digitally for you to see the gun before we build it, and it's 3 a month, and that's it. And then we have our core line, which is, we call it custom at the core because it uses custom type components to build really, really solid rifles that, you would pay another gunsmith to go buy all the parts that we make anyway and assemble a similar rifle. And so we started doing that, and it was wild. So for reference, 2023, we're still a custom gun company. We finished the year at around 250 guns total. Right. So this is the time, nothing, not to support this amount of ammo. So then you go forward to 2024, we launched 22 Creedmoor in August. And by the end of the year, we've now booked, manufactured, sold 940, right? So massive exponential growth. We go into 2025, and February 2025, we book more than we ship the entire full year. So we go from like 200 guns to on pace right now to be right under 10,000 guns in like a 2.5 year window.
Incredible.
Right. And so it was just wild. And,
it's important to talk about that too, because so many companies, I always say, like, companies fail either because they don't sell enough or they sell too much, and they can't handle the growth. We went through that period as well. With Texas Precious Metals in 2023, we just had this explosive growth that
you're still having explosive growth.
Especially with gold at 3,300 at the time of this recording. No, but it's so difficult to be able to grow the company at speed, to train people up, to hire the right people, to maintain the culture, to, all of the tribal knowledge that goes with making these, specialty items, and having to keep pace with this enormous demand that's coming in on 22 Creedmoor, and really being the only game in town for a lot of that stock.
Yep. And I think like that, I mean, I think we had a lot of people like yourself that believed in us, and at the same time, we had the system of Casper, right? So, the financial backing, the understanding of how to I mean, at the root of it, Casper's been building product for 120 years.
Let's talk about Casper just for a second too, because obviously people know that, I'm the president of Texas Precious Metals, the co-founder of that company. You're the founder of Horizon Firearms. Casper operates a lot like a Berkshire Hathaway, where you have this parent company with a lot of administrative services, and then you have these subsidiary businesses that are underneath that parent. And actually, as I'm talking to you today, we're here for the annual Casper Business Summit. And so as we are, talking about our stories, and I'm factoring into your story, you're factoring into mine, what might be confusing to people is that we actually cross-pollinate a lot of our ideas, and we are all of the presidents of the companies and the founders are, trying to think of creative ways to, share, market schemes or, run ideas by people. What would you do in this situation? How would you go to market with this? How would you brand that? And so, I have spent a lot of time on the Horizon side and Texas Ammo, and we'll talk about Circle Y a little bit later as well, and kind of how that factors into the whole thing.
Well, and I think that's like the strength of it, right? So you have this company that operates like a big corporation that's still family owned and operated, which gives them like this weird nimbleness that doesn't exist in other places that I've seen, with like a system that they've created themselves that sort of has these arms that kind of operate autonomously but sort of the same. So it's a really weird soup.
And you're able to have, I mean, obviously Texas Precious Metals is a mature company, but you are able to have these incubated businesses that allow entrepreneurs, to be creative, to fail, to have the backing, to have the infrastructure, the support, the wisdom, the guidance, the mentorship, the capital, to successfully go to market. And in today's world, a lot of businesses that finally get their feet off the ground are acquired by private equity, and most private equity firms, I don't want to generalize every single private equity firm, but they're in it to fix and flip or cut costs and flip it, and they don't look at the long term, and they're not interested in playing the long game. The Caspers have always been playing the long game.
The long game is their game.
That is their game. They're going to outlast everybody, right? 126 years. You and I have known each other, gosh, for how long at this point? 14,
Dude, can't
15
tell that
years.
story. Can't tell that story, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't even know. That had to have been what, 2009, 2010?
No, 2010.
Okay, so 2010. We're back here in Shiner. This is still in the soup of Horizon's early days, and again, my wife's fifth generation. And I remember it was like, hey, we're gonna have this meeting with this guy, and he's got this business idea. Yeah, it'll be through Zoom. He'll be on TV. He lives
not Zoom.
In,
it was like Skype.
It was Skype. It was pre-Zoom. And you were in Argentina at the time, right? So I'm like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to have a chance to talk to some guy through this computer program that's kind of new in Argentina. Let's do this. And so I remember basically you're like, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some cash. We're going to put it in gold and silver, but it's actually still like your cash. And we're going to like do these terms, and it's okay. It's super safe. And like this whole thing, I'm like, wow, this is different. This is crazy, but cool idea. And then I remember, like, we finished it, like, okay, we should probably try that. And then I remember my father-in-law, like, I don't know if he hand delivered you the money or whatever he had to do.
We had like a 45-minute call on Thanksgiving where he was like, who is this guy?
Yeah, are we really gonna wire this guy like $1 million to start this company? Like, what is going? And I love hearing your side of the story from being like, you're giving. I'm seeing this as a major, awesome presentation. Got dressed up, and you're giving the other side of the story where you're like in a cardboard box, your wife climbing through the window, and I just like when I finally heard that story, I'm like, I resonate with this guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
I haven't told that story. When you say my wife climbing through the window, let me explain this. We had rented a place in Argentina, and it was a small place, and I had a newborn baby, and it was our second child, and we had one bedroom, and so there was no office for me. So the only office I had was the mudroom. Okay, so I converted the mudroom of this little apartment into my office, and it was the only door in and out of the apartment. So when I'm on a business call, my wife couldn't roll through the mudroom, like, because I didn't want anybody to hear the child or whatever. And so she would climb in and out of the bedroom window to sneak back into our house because I had the mudroom on lockdown. So
I love it. It's the same kind of thing. Like I said, Cheris had Ryder in our back room, and so
exactly.
I love the parallels. But yeah, so man, we go
very
way,
patient
way back.
wives.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that was, and I still remember too, real early in Texas Precious Metal. I don't know if you remember, y'all had me do a delivery to a Horizon customer. Remember that?
I remember that.
Yeah.
So, wait, remind me that.
Yeah.
story.
So I remember y'all calling me up and say, hey, okay, we sell gold and silver to these customers, and then we have to kind of deliver it, but like their special thing, like we need you to go to this bank and pick up this bag, take the gold and silver out of this bag, and then deliver it to this guy. He's going to come by and meet you. And I'm like, okay. He said, and I remember you say, we'll give you a Texas Silver round to do it. And I still have that Texas Silver round in my gun safe.
We're paying big money back then.
I was like, all right, cool, this is neat. So I remember I roll up to the bank in College Station and walk in. So I got to talk to the banker. And I said, hey, you got a Brinks truck coming here with some stuff for me. And I remember they looked at me like, what? And I said, look, I understand it may not be here yet. Here's my phone number. And I don't make it a mile back out of the bank, and the lady calls me furious, and she's like, "You have to get here now and never do this again." And I remember you telling me like, take different back ways, make sure nobody's following you. Like, what is going on? So I like walk out of the bank with this bank bag of stuff, and I think it was a couple $1,000,000 or something in gold and silver, and but it was just like that's how it was.
I have so many stories. The early days. I mean, it really was the Wild West, especially when I moved back to Shiner, and we were sitting right in the heart of the Eagleford shale boom, and there was just money flowing from everywhere. Remember I remember one lady came in, and so we call it mailbox money. Basically, the oil companies will mail checks for the oil residuals, right? And a lot of these farmers who haven't had any money their entire lives, but they're sitting on 600 acres, they were fracking underneath their land. And this old lady, she's maybe 80 years old or whatever. She walks into the bank and she says, "I want to cash this $1,500 check." And the lady on the other side, do you know the story?
No, I think I've heard this.
The lady on the other side is like, "Ma'am, that ain't a $1,500 check. That's a $1.5 million check." I mean, and this was happening everywhere, all over the place. So the people were like, what are we going to do with all this money? And so we ended up being the beneficiary of that. Like a lot of people were buying precious metals, and they're like, can you deliver it to me over here on County Road 350? And like all this kind of stuff. It was pretty crazy.
You figured it out, man.
Figured it out. I want to close with just a couple things. Number one, this.
Yeah. It's our rabble, man.
This is the first time I've even seen. What
I know.
That's
why I brought it. So you like that.
This reminds me of those pistols from like 1789.
So what I love about this, and again, it's very Horizon. That's why I wanted to bring it. So we got a couple things going on. We've got the Wombat Action, which I love branding. So it actually has a little angry wombat. And our marketing, kind of slogan for it is the cuddliest little death machine. So a skeletonized action is light as titanium, but made out of steel. Something that we in-house developed. Something I'm super, super proud of. But the pistol itself, we call it our Rabble pistol. And I run a YouTube channel, 22 Creedmoor. We have an On the Horizon podcast, and we kept getting questions asked around the 22 Creedmoor. Well, what speed is it at this barrel length? What speed is it at this barrel length? And so I got an idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a 26-inch long, so a rifle-length pistol. I'm going to go out. I'm going to shoot a YouTube video. We'll shoot it, and we'll cut it off with a hacksaw. Shoot it and cut it off with a hacksaw. And then when we get down to 13 inches, shoot a group. Yeah. So we get down to 13 inches and shoot a right at a half-minute angle group at 400 yards with this pistol. And people kept asking, and I never intended to sell it, right? And people kept saying, well, hey, can I buy that pistol? Can I buy that pistol? And so we started making the Rabble pistol based on our YouTube series that we did.
So cool.
So I just figured you'd appreciate that.
It's just more innovation.
With it.
You've actually deer hunted with it.
Oh, yeah. I deer hunted with that this year.
So cool.
So
before I get into the last topic here, Kat's going to get mad if I don't remind every listener to hit the like button, subscribe,
100%.
5 stars across the board if you're liking this, and if you don't like it, please don't do anything.
Well, and I will say, and not to shameless plug here either, but people don't realize how important that is. So like, we've now got maybe 10,000 or whatever on ours. For a group that's getting started, like and subscribe early. So if you're a passive listener of this, don't be a passive listener of this, because
please.
it helps you keep going.
Share it. Send it to your friends if you think it's useful, if it's interesting.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to figure it out. This is what, episode 7?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're trying to bring good content and great guests like you. Want to close with Circle Y.
Yeah.
So kind of coming full circle.
Full circle, man.
Horse lover, guy easily distracted by cows.
Easily distracted by cows. I love it.
We Casper Companies. I say we Casper Companies. Last year, 2 years ago, bought Circle Y saddles.
Yep.
And so the history of Circle Y, I'd like you to get into that just a little bit, because it ties back into the Casper history as well. Yep. But Circle Y is the largest by volume saddle manufacturer in the world at this point.
Correct.
I think, right?
Correct.
And like we were saying, the presidents and the founders of the subsidiaries get involved with the other businesses, and you have a huge passion for riding, for horsemanship, for cows and all that good stuff. And I, through Texas Precious Metals, we've become a big sponsor of pro rodeo.
Exactly,
and so we've been heavily involved in that, and that's been a whole lot of fun. And we had Cody Webster on here. We're gonna have a bunch of other rodeo guys.
Still
NFR.
Jealous you're working with Riley. So
Riley
he's
Webb.
listening to this.
Yeah.
We're coming on later. You need to come holler at me.
Riley, you're coming here. We're gonna learn about your story. Riley Webb, 2-time NFR champion.
Needs to be riding the Circle Y.
Circle Y, yeah. So what's going on with Circle Y? How are you getting involved with that?
Let me start by telling you the history. Like I told you, I'm a sucker for legacy, right?
Yep.
And so what's so cool about Circle Y is I'm going to call it a descendant of Textan. So Textan, for anybody who doesn't know, Casper Company. So Casper is one granddad or one great-great-granddad on one side that basically started picking up wire and making wire products. At the same time, basically this other descendant, so the other side of the family, this Wellhausen side, came back to Yoakum and started a tannery, which later become one of the biggest tanneries and one of the biggest saddle producers as Textan, and was later acquired by Tandy Corp. And essentially, Carl Wellhausen, who started Textan, ultimately ended up on the board at Radio Shack, right?
Oh,
which
weird.
is crazy when you think about it from the leather side. Well, when Textan sold to Tandy Corp, there were some individuals who basically busted off of that, and Yoakum, the land of leather, spun off multiple saddle companies, and one of those being Circle Y. And so, and
the Y standing for Yoakum.
First stands for Yoakum, yeah. And so I remember, it was kind of an interesting, again, one of those interesting unique moments in life where the current owner of, or I guess you call it previous owner of Circle Y, was actually planning a church in College Station, which is where I live, right? And so he was flying back and forth, and the plane went down, and I believe it was 4 individuals tragically passed away, one lone survivor on that deal, and Yoakum being so close to Shiner,
10 miles away.
10 miles away, yeah, and basically Jason somehow made some relationship with Circle Y, and we were able to kind of tell them our story of how we felt like that was part of our legacy and wanted that to be back into kind of the Casper suite. And so the actual formal name of what we call all the Circle brands is Wellhausen Legacy. Mm-hmm. And so Wellhausen Legacy acquired Circle Y, which also includes Rainsman and also includes Tucker and Precision Saddle Tree. So basically, they do all these various things in the leather world, and so
they do contract manufacturing also for other
saddle
companies.
Exactly.
A lot of like the saddle trees for other saddle
for some
companies
of
are manufactured
for some of
here.
your big guys, your high-end Coates Burns, like those kind of guys. We make a lot of parts for those kind of things. So it was cool about it from that sense. And then I'm going to back into my world. So. Growing up, obviously roping and ranching, it was a big deal. And one Christmas, my dad gave me a saddle that I still own today. It meant a whole lot to me. And that saddle was a Hereford, which is Textan. And inside that saddle has these D-rings that were made by Casper, long before I met my wife, right?
Crazy.
And it meant so much to me at that time, and my dad and I's relationship was a little rocky at that point. And it was like, to me, Textan just meant everything, right? So when we lived here so I'm going to bring it all back together. When we lived here in Shiner, we were up in the attic at the Homestead house and found this picture. And it's basically these 3 horses running down the road, and then kind of the back 2 other horses. Man, it was just a beautiful picture. And so we kept it when we moved out of Shiner, and Uncle Doug saw it and said, well, that was in Carl Wellhausen's office at Tandy.
No way.
Or at Texas stand. And so that is in my dining room, right? And so, fast forward.
So you took all the good stuff out of the Homestead house.
I got
There's nothing left by the time I got there.
I got the goods out of there. But yeah, so it was just like that whole legacy piece in leather and like, growing up in the ranching family and just really living that lifestyle. The opportunity came here just a few weeks ago, almost a month now, to be involved as the VP of marketing for Circle Brands, which includes kind of that whole group. And so, yeah, I mean, I told my wife, look, I'm founder of Horizon, doing VP of marketing and products over there, and I know I'm busy. I know I travel a lot, but here's this opportunity. And I remember she was like, oh gosh.
And when you say marketing, I mean, marketing can be a broad term. It's also product development.
Yeah.
That falls under marketing.
Correct. So product development, and then I strongly believe in influencer relation building. Not just like sponsoring people, but basically bringing influencers into the family and, helping ourselves, working with them to develop new products that people actually want and then understanding how to promote them in the correct kind of way. Yeah. And that's what I love most about my job is, working with the people like, a lady named Kenda, who's like the #1 mounted shooter, and then people like Martha Josie, who's one of the most well-known names, legacies in the barrel world. And so just a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, my wife, I told her and she was like, oh, and she came back in the room and said, look, here's the deal. I know you. And I know that like you're made up of guns and everything that is Cal Western, right? And if it was anything else, I'd tell you to run like crazy, but I know that I can't tell you no. And
wow.
So here we are.
For a company that is 40, 50 years old at this point. 65 years
Yeah,
old.
just celebrated their 65th.
Sheesh. I've been privy to a lot of the conversations to see where Circle Y is about to go, what's coming down the pike, what innovations are.
I'm very excited.
I mean, we can't talk about all of it yet, but if you're listening and you're in the outdoor, space, pro rodeo, you ride horses, wait till you see what's coming.
I can't wait, man. We're gonna do Horizon things to Circle Brands. That's how I like to say it, right?
Go get it. Go get it, brother.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
It's been so good.